Day one of San Francisco 49ers training camp in the books. Jauan Jennings there, catching passes, not holding in for the San Francisco 49ers, and a ton more notes and some comments from Nick Bosa, George Kittle, Coach Shanahan, and a lot more on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Coach Crocky. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love and appreciate all the everydayers out there. We're here. Practices are happening. No pads quite yet, but we know exactly when that's going to happen. Real football is what that's called, according to George Kittle. But thanks for hanging out with us all offseason long. We're back, and the season is now getting rolling. The quest for 6 still on for the San Francisco 49ers. I know you guys have been with us for 8 years now on Locked On 49ers. So phenomenal stuff. Thanks for hanging with us, and tell a friend about Locked On 49ers and subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. We got to start with Jauan Jennings. The biggest story suddenly the week before camp starts. There's a report. He's requested a trade, wants a new contract. No doubt, I'm sure he wants a new contract commensurate with being the leading receiver on the team last year and being the leading receiver on the team coming into training camp. And the fact that he showed up at training camp, reported, and is not holding in, he is at practice, is absolutely the biggest story of camp, the biggest story of day one of practices for the San Francisco 49ers. And I don't know, I almost feel like, Croc, that strategy is probably a better strategy for Jennings to actually get the deal he wants, is to actually show up and be that guy for the 49ers right now.
It definitely is. And that's something that I wonder if his agent advised that, right? Because a lot of times, like, man, hold out, stand pat, like, don't bend into any rules that they want to make or anything like that. This is what we're going to do. And he said, nah, I'm going to go out there and show them my work, right? Like, I had a terrific season last year with the opportunities that you got. I don't know if I'm going to get those same type of opportunities, but I'm going to go out there on the practice field and I'm going to show you this is what I bring to the team on top of what you already seen, right? Like, you guys need me right now, right? You need me to step up and be that guy. Oh yeah. First day of training camp, I'm going to show you I can be the guy that you need when you don't have Pearsall out there, when you don't have Brandon Ayuk out there. I can still be productive. If I were him, I would do that and then just like keep running to the locker room and then just, now I'm not coming back out. Now pay me.
Just make I think it's according to Mayoko, 3 passes were caught by Jauan Jennings at practice, and maybe that's all he needed to do: show up, catch some passes, remind everybody, and more on the hamstrings of Ricky Pearsall and now Jacob Cowing. Good news on the one, bad news on the other for the 49ers day one of training camp practices. We saw the dap up. We saw the hug. We saw that last offseason, last training camp with Kyle Shanahan and Brandon Ayuk. It was weird then. Felt a lot better this time, seeing Jauan Jennings, middle of the field, dapping up his coach at practice with the full, uniform on, not the pads and everything, but, day one training camp. Jauan Jennings there, not holding in right now. So that's good vibes for the San Francisco 49ers on day one. The best vibes possible is that scenario for the 49ers on day one of training camp right now. One of the things I've noticed with Kyle Shanahan now 2 days in a row at the podium, some quotes from Kyle Shanahan about day one of practice. And then he was talking yesterday before the first day of practice, seeing Nick Bosa that we know puts work in the offseason. Brock Purdy looking thick, looking like he put in some work as well in the weight room. Like, everybody's tan is on point. Everybody's like got a brand new haircut. Kyle Shanahan clearly probably $100 haircut, right? Like, it was a nice looking haircut for Kyle Shanahan. He looked rested a little bit, more rested I've seen him in a while. And it's just a reminder of the offseason, a fresh start, and Nick Bosa just looking ripped and looking lean, and seeing Mykel Williams just look huge. Alfred Collins looking massive. Just seeing him work against a a coach holding a bag. Probably helps that the coach is not a full-size offensive lineman. Made Alfred Collins look even bigger, but the dude's like 6'6", 330. You're like, that guy is massive. But just seeing him doing bag drills, right, with a coach, seeing Mykel Williams look the part, and these guys got their new haircuts, they got their tans, they got their off-season workouts in, they're looking lean, they're looking mean, looking refreshed. I think it was probably my biggest takeaway from day one of camp.
That's one of the biggest takeaways, right? All eyes are going to be on that 49ers front, and they've invested a lot this offseason, and then specifically this draft, right? You look at the draft, it's like, man, the first 5-6 picks, all defensive players. You want those guys to come in and at the very least look the part. You look at Mykel Williams, look at his size, look at Alfred Collins, that guy. I can't wait to hear about Nick Martin. What does it look like with him flying around? So all those things are great. I think the big thing is, and we continue to kind of, I don't want to say gloss over this name, but just how this guy plays into all of this. But Bryce Huff. I got the name right? Correct?
Yeah, Bryce Huff. Yeah, not Bryce Hall or Brees Hall.
Not Bryce Hall, not Brees Hall. All right. Bryce Huff. There we go. Bryce Huff, man. And when you go to that package, especially that third down passing team, and you start to slide Mykel Williams inside, and you have one thing we haven't talked about with Collins is, okay, good versus the run, big body, all that. But his ability to stretch those big arms up and bat passes down. He batted down a lot of balls in practice. So, and maybe I'm not getting in college. Maybe he's not getting to the quarterback and getting sacked, but he's still affecting the pass. So you start seeing all that. Oh, and by the way, there's this guy by the name of Nick Bosa, who is a former defensive player of the year. It sounds like things are starting to kind of come together a little bit for the 49ers in that front four.
I want to talk a little bit about that because Nick Bosa was asked about rushing from inside and what he's seen from Mykel Williams. And it does feel like Nick Bosa, just in very, like, I haven't even been at practices and, talked to him personally or anything, but just seeing his interactions with Mykel Williams in OTAs, in training camp, hearing him talk about the young man, and then hearing Nick Bosa speak on his leadership. It feels like Nick Bosa is embracing a little bit more of a leadership role. We know he's not the most vocal guy in the world, but he's the old head. He's still 27 years old. I don't know. Bosa's still really young, but he's been a quiet guy, right? But he's the leader in that defensive line room by a lot now. There's no Eric Armstead around, and there's not even a Leonard Floyd that's an older veteran in the room. Like that is Nick Bosa's defensive line room, and having a bunch of rookies in there with him this year, he is definitely embracing, it feels like, a leadership role there. And he was asked about rushing from inside and what that's like. And he talks about how he hasn't really done that a lot recently, but he talked about guys that did it and what it takes to be good at doing that. And it's not necessarily a physical skill set, because he talked about some different guys that have done that and been good at it, with Arden Key and Charles Amenahu and some other guys. And hearing some reports about Mykel Williams looking really good when he was moved in day one of camp, like that's a feature of this defense, is going to be Mykel Williams. Power, big end on early downs. He's going to move inside and he's going to rush. And he looked really good doing it. Beat Dominic Pooney apparently in practice today, soundly. And it was interesting what Nick Bosa said about rushing inside. He said, you have to speed up the hands in a way because you are in tight quarters. And I thought that was really interesting, because that's something I saw and something I've been thinking about a lot with the 49ers defensive line. And in some ways, length is so important on the outside, and length sometimes can be very helpful if you can control the offensive lineman early with your length and your arms. But sometimes being really long inside, we saw this with Javon Kinlaw. And it's one of the questions I have with Alfred Collins. He's got these 35-inch arms. He's going to have to be, being big is great, but you have to be quick inside too. And you have to speed up. You have to be quicker actually with your hands on the inside than you do when you're outside on the edge. So I thought it was a really interesting comment with Nick Bosa, and why some other guys have had some success moving from outside in, and maybe speeding up your hands is one of the important key factors of being a good interior pass rusher. You got to strike first.
It's not something that I've thought a whole lot about, but I guess if you think about it now, right, when you're on the outside, the tackles, just the way they set in their pass set, right? They're gaining depth, right? They're gaining depth, gaining a little bit of width. You as an edge rusher, you're not just running straight into them. You kind of, just the path takes a little bit longer, as opposed to I'm a 3 tech or I'm a nose. I'm lined up a yard or not even away from this guy. And as soon as the snap of that ball happens, I'm up and I'm in their chest and I have to work the hands right now. So I can see how you have to definitely quicken up the hands unless you just plan on being a bull rusher the whole time, which we've always also seen. That's not going to work at the NFL levels. Those offensive linemen, they are strong as well.
So if we're talking about training camp battles, obviously the rookies on the defensive line is a huge one. How much of a role will those guys earn good results from day one, just with Mykel Williams looking the part and just Alfred Collins, who couldn't practice in the springtime, being on the field and getting some work in and looking absolutely massive on the field. So yeah, it's going to be a fun training camp battle to watch. More training camp battles we got to discuss today and probably a lot this summer is linebacker, nickel corner, and of course, kicker. Croc, the most underrated training camp battle of all. Nick Bosa is intrigued himself with that kicking battle, and wide receiver hamstrings is a focal point of this offseason and this training camp that we hoped we would not be talking about, that we're going to have to talk about next. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. And fantasy football, it's back, right? So excited about it, fired up. You get excited seeing these guys running in routes, and you're going to hear some early reports, and you're going to see fantasy boards with guys moving up, moving down based on training camp reports, based on the preseason. You fire up the group chat, buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. I play Yahoo Fantasy this year and every year. I've been playing Yahoo Fantasy since the 90s. I think the first time I played Yahoo Fantasy baseball was like 1999, maybe. And football was probably right around the same time. And they've been doing it for 28 years at Yahoo. And to celebrate those 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins August 4th. Stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. So good and bad news when it comes to wide receiver hamstrings, Croc. Ricky Pearsall was running at practice, looking good, running at some very high speeds, and had the GPS tracker on and getting his work in. And just as Kyle Shanahan talked about yesterday, and he kind of doubled down on it, and he said, yeah, Pearsall looks good. Pearsall is going to be back essentially Sunday. The first 3-day period, they're going to have an off day. They're going to practice Sunday, which is practice number 4. And then Kyle Shanahan talked about how you got to have 4 practices in before you put the pads on. That means pads Monday, Croc. And as George Kittle said post day 1 of training camp practice, that's real football. Football is played with pads on. You can't tell anything until the pads come on. So circle Monday. Ricky Pearsall is going to be at practice. George Kittle is going to be fired up. The pads are going to be on. It's a big day for 49ers training camp on Monday after the first 3 practices and then a day off. Unfortunately, though, Jacob Cowing, who Kyle Shanahan said has had one of the best OTAs and spring practices of anybody on the entire team, he pulled a hammy, routes on air before practice even got going. So hopefully he's back. You might have a trade-off. We talked about one of the guys that it was the biggest camp. Like, this is one of the biggest months of Jacob Cowing's life. And he starts it off with a hamstring injury, which is really unfortunate. Hopefully it's not a significant setback for him.
Maybe not significant, but I don't know. I feel like those hamstring things, they're always kind of significant, especially for a guy who's trying to carve out a role for himself on this team. And talked about how Kyle Shanahan has spoken glowingly of him. And I think the expectations were there for him to maybe take a year or 2 jump, especially in the opportunities that he was going to get. And you come out and having a hamstring injury. Usually to me, that means that you didn't ramp up your body the way it needed to be during your month off or a month and a half off, however long it was before training camp was going to start. Like you got to be running out there. You got to be taking care of your body and doing those things. And if you think you're going to come out here and even just run routes on the air and be able to go full go without ramping your body up to do those things, well, you're going to pull something. And that's exactly what happened to him.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. And he obviously needs to have a big camp and a big preseason and earn some. Well, there's two things going on with someone like Jacob Cowing, because the 49ers need guys that are going to be ready. And by numerous reports of people who were there at practice, watching practice, DeMarcus Robinson looked like the veteran he is, looked good at practice on day one. But he's very likely going to be suspended for a few games. So as good as he looks, that's nice depth to have during the season. But week one, you got to have some guys out there. So hopefully Ricky Pearsall is back, and Jacob Cowing was going to be someone that was potentially going to be a big part of that. Jauan Jennings hopefully is a big part of that. And now you might have a swap of Cowing going to the injured list, Ricky Pearsall coming off the injured list, which is good for Pearsall, not as good for Jacob Cowing. You know, crossing your fingers for good news on Cowing hamstring, and hopefully that just lasts a few days and doesn't, really derail his summer, his training camp, and his preseason, which is, such a huge opportunity for him. And look, the Niners need guys. They just signed a guy because they were down. If Cowing's down, do they have to sign another guy tomorrow? And Kyle Shanahan was asked that question. They tried out 6 players, so they could probably have somebody on speed dial to bring in if they want. Equanimeous St. Brown was on the field for the first time a day after signing his contract with the 49ers. So, yeah, man, they're thin out there at wide receiver. That's definitely what they did not need, is another hamstring.
See if I can pull up the list of guys that the 49ers worked out.
I remember Quintez Cephus was one of the guys on the list. He was he kind of had a similar pre-draft profile to Jauan Jennings. Didn't run fast, kind of a physical type of receiver. I think he was maybe a day 3 pick, 5th, 6th round pick, ran a really slow 40 time, but clearly hasn't stuck with anybody. Was he North Carolina? Is that where Quintez Cephus was from?
No, it was one of those red and white teams, like either Wisconsin or Nebraska.
Ooh, you're right. You're absolutely right on that. I think it was Nebraska. I think you nailed it.
And he was drafted by the Detroit Lions, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 5th or 6th round. Yeah,
I remember him coming out. He was more of a. I remember he might have been Brandon Ayuk class. He was around there, but he was more of like a route runner, not a blazer. He was one of those guys. I have the list up right here, but obviously Quintez Cephus, St. Brown, DeBose, Brandon Powell, Ramel Keaton, who I have no idea, and then Stanley Morgan, who Stanley, I believe, was Nebraska as well. So there were a few guys. But yeah, this is exactly what Kyle Shanahan was talking about. You're down a couple guys, and some guys go out there. Then if another guy goes down, where does that put you? And I know exactly what happens in these kind of situations. They're going to look at depth from another position, say, we like this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. And the guy that's at the bottom, they're going to cut his butt, and they're going to sign another receiver. I've personally seen it happen.
Crocker getting PTSD over here. Somebody on the offensive side of the ball pulls a hamstring, so they got to go cut a cornerback.
Yeah, like, what did I do? Get out of here. Joe McKnight has a concussion. Chris Ivory has a high ankle sprain. Brian Winters has a high ankle sprain. We need to bring guys in to play that position in this upcoming game. We got to let guys go from a position where we have more depth. That's exactly how it happens.
We got to talk about some camp competitions here, Croc. There's a kicking competition going on. There's a competition at linebacker. First, I want to talk about the competition for the 3rd cornerback. Kyle Shanahan was kind of non-committal, talking about whether or not you can tell that the 49ers want Upton Stout to win the nickel corner job, and they want Deommodore Lenoir to not have to move from outside in. But essentially, without saying it, Kyle Shanahan, after day 1 of practice, laid out the competition is essentially who are the best 3 guys. So it's not so much Upton Stout against another nickel. It's Upton Stout against who would be the 3rd corner that would come in on the outside if Deommodore Lenoir was the nickel and moved from outside in those situations, which is essentially Upton Stout. Is he the best option to give them the best three with Renardo Green and Diamador Lenore on the outside? Or is it Darrell Luter on the outside with Demo inside, or Trey Brown, or any of the other number of cornerbacks on the roster? And by all reports, Upton Stout had a really nice start and looks the part and is quick out there, and actually even too quick, according to Kyle Shanahan. Could have jumped the pass and intercepted it and maybe taken it back to the house. And it was actually, I think it was a completed pass because he actually jumped the route too quick. So Upton Stout, the speed of the game, not a problem for him on day one.
We talked about it. This is typically a position where it takes a little bit longer to get acclimated, but not for a guy like Upton Stout, who actually played this position in college. A lot of guys have his stature, but they're outside corners in college. You get to the NFL, you're not long enough to play on the outside. You got to play in the slot. Well, for him, seamless transition, and it sounds like he's hitting the ground running. Now, we heard about him, jumping passes. That's awesome. How is he doing with the run fits? That's going to be an even bigger thing. And I think that's something that they know at the very least. Hey, man, we can count on that with our guy Diamador Lenore. We know he knows how to do those things. How's Upton Stout? Look, I do like the idea of fielding our best three corners and what that combination of guys looks like, right? Between two outside guys and a nickel. So who's the best for us to get that done? What's the best combination of guys? And I'm pretty sure Upton Stout, if it is Upton Stout, that's a perfect world scenario. Whereas, all right, we're good. We got Green, we got Lenore, and we got Upton Stout, and now we don't have to worry about it. If it's not Upton Stout, now there starts to be a lot of moving pieces because he's not going to play on the outside. And then what happens to Upton Stout? That's another thing, right? Where now it's like, well, I can't play on the outside. I can't even compete on the outside with these guys. So now all of a sudden I'm just a special teams player.
Yeah, Stout goes from 70% of the snaps to 0% of the snaps if he doesn't start at nickel.
Yeah.
The kicking competition, linebacker competition, and according to Nick Bosa, what it means to have Robert Saleh back coaching that defense next. This episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app, too. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, personal and shared accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And maybe you have that big financial goal you're saving for college. Maybe you are trying to purchase your first home. Maybe you're looking ahead to retirement. Whatever it is, Monarch Money is there to help you. And man, looking at your spending, that stuff adds up quick, and you can be very surprised by how quick some of that spending adds up. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LockedOnNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LockedOnNFL for half off your first year. I want to go to Nick Bosa's comments next about Robert Saleh, because this is pretty important. And basically, he said, Saleh's commanding presence is, quote, what we needed on defense. And I imagine it's probably a weight off Kyle Shanahan's shoulders to not have to keep one eye on the defense or both eyes on the defense in some cases with, a first-time defensive coordinator or a changeover, and trying to make sure that the scheme he wants to be there is there for a guy who doesn't even run the scheme that he's brought in to coach on the defensive side of the ball. And Kyle has talked about, just some of the lessons that Robert Saleh has learned from being a head coach in the NFL now, comes back and is in charge of the defense. And I think it's a pretty massive. We can talk about the rookies all day, and Mykel Williams and Alfred Collins and Upton Stout and all these guys, and that's all really important. But I think the biggest move the 49ers made on defense was bringing back Robert Saleh. And according to Nick Bosa, exactly what they needed.
Man, talking about the personality of them and how they really just align with that and they're able to play for that. I think that could be a big thing. If you're used to a certain thing, there's X's and O guys all over. And one of the biggest things, especially as it pertains to the players and coach, like, you got to buy in. And sometimes just a more demanding personality gets you to just be on your toes a little bit more. So now we're just playing a little bit faster. And you would hope that, I mean, these guys are professionals. You'd hope that they're playing like that, regardless of who it is. But there may be something to it when it comes to Robert Saleh. Now, I will say this. It's also tougher when you're a 6-10 team or 6-11 team. Like when you're winning a bunch of games, you're flying around. Like were they speaking this glowingly of Robert Saleh when they were winning, 6 games and 6 games to start the tenure of this? Like, no, they weren't speaking of. Now, not to say that they didn't like him and that he wasn't doing things well, but I remember those times, and it wasn't all on him. We know, like, that was a rebuilding team. They had 0 pass rush. They were talking about Cassius Marsh like he was Max Crosby. We remember all that. And you had to get the guys, you had to get the dogs, but that wasn't the talk surrounding Robert Saleh in those moments. And then now you're winning, and then everybody turned it up a notch. The focus, the preparation, all those things are on 10 now, and there's no time to slack off. And you're seeing the best version of it. And I think that's the last thing they remember. I also think that right now, July 23rd, as we're recording this, it's a happy birthday to my son, Juice. Shout out to Juice. Today's his birthday. But July 23rd, as we are recording this, I think it's easy in training camp to be, we're this and that. All right, let's get a few games in, a quarter or 2 quarters of the way through the season, and let's see if that's still the way that they feel. I will say this, regardless of what the record was a couple years ago with Steve Wilks, it always felt like there was something off. And I don't think that Steve Wilks was bad as a DC, but they definitely weren't vibing with him. So there could be some truth to that.
It was just bad fits and just not ideal circumstances at defensive coordinator the last couple of years. And you can't even blame Sorensen or Steve Wilks for that. Sorensen, the first time defense coordinator, Wilks was asked to play a scheme that wasn't his. I mean, that's not a great formula right there. So love having Saleh back in command there. And the last note from Nick Bosa at the podium, he's excited. He was watching it. Like he's got a front row seat for that kicking competition with Greg Joseph and Nick Moody. And I was thinking about this before camp started, and especially with George Odom getting released, Croc. And Brant Boyer, the new special teams coordinator for the 49ers, has changed everybody on special teams, literally the entire special teams. So Nick Moody's probably sitting there like, the Key and Peele meme where he's sweating. Like, you show up to camp, everybody else but you is gone with this new special teams coordinator. You got to earn your job if you're Nick Moody. That 3rd round pick, that was a little bit ago now. You can't coast on that.
Jake Moody.
What did I say? Nick Moody, former linebacker for the 49ers. Jake Moody. Sorry, I got to put some respect on Jake Moody's name. Jake Moody, Money Moody. He's got to earn that job. And Nick Bosa, for one, is intrigued by it and paying attention.
Well, both kickers between Greg Joseph and Jake Moody did a good job today. Both going 4 for 4, both hitting. One of those would being a 50-yard field goal. So as of right now, we got a tie in training camp. The stats for training camp are always like a little weird. And more times than not, we hear it because of the quarterback position and they keep track of incompletions and all that. But kicking, that might be the one where it's a little bit more like just black and white. You either make the kick or you don't. It's not like, I got rushed this way, so kind of overthrew a guy and it's an incomplete, or I was throwing the ball away, so it's an incomplete pass. It's like, no, you either make it or you don't. And both of those guys were money today, making 4 for 4. Typically not as much pressure in practice, but I think when you are truly competing for a job, every kick matters.
Man, and I don't think it's like necessarily a big deal. Maybe it is, but I thought it was weird. Remember when we were at camp and one kicker would be kicking the whole time one day? And with Brant Boyer, both kickers are kicking on the same day. Like, that's a competition, right?
Yeah.
You kick by yourself one day? Like, that didn't feel right. So early returns on Brant Boyer and Robert Saleh. I think they upgraded it at the coordinator spots.
I'm all for anyone who's creating competition. I think everybody should feel that. I think everybody should feel the pressure of not being able to mess up. I had a kid tell me, "Hey, coach, I'm not going to be able to go to practice. We're going to the Bay Area to my aunt's birthday party. I was like, oh, it's cool. Darion and Lambert, they'll hold down the corner spot. He said, you know what, coach? I'll be at practice. Like pressure kind of brings the best out of everybody. And there's just a little bit more assertiveness to it, knowing that, man, a little hiccup here or there, somebody else can be taking my spot. Nobody likes that. They don't want that to happen. So just a little bit more. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the best version of Jake Moody that we see, because, man, it's not the pressure of coming in and kicking it. It's, man, this guy right next to me, they're looking at him to replace me. Like, the 49ers want to get better than whatever Moody has given them so far. And they brought this guy in to do it. Like, that's pressure.
From what I understand, I had some scouts in the stands at Stag High practice today, Croc, and apparently Coach Eric Crocker, 7 for 7 on field goal attempts. So if Jake Moody or Greg Joseph fails to impress, I know a guy that they can call whose money I've seen you kick in Crocs and hit those field goals from some distance as well. So kudos, Croc.
My kicker, or really two of my kickers, they're also club soccer players. So they're there at certain times, and at certain times of the week, they're not there. Today, we're working on PAT. And I told the guys, like, oh, I got it. I'll kick. They're like, Coach Croc, you can't kick. I'm like, look, when we were younger, we did everything. We played outside. We did every punt, pass, kick. They used to have those competitions, the punt, pass, and kick competitions. Yeah. We did everything. You guys don't even play 21 anymore. All right. We did everything growing up, including kick. So I can just randomly kick field goals. And they didn't believe me, and I was nailing them. They're like, that's luck. Move it back. Moved it back. Nailed it. Move it back again, Coach Croc. Nailed it. I made it look so easy that some of the other skill guys thought they could do it. Wasn't close. You guys aren't like us when we were growing up. All right. They're not like us.
They don't play 21 anymore?
I don't think they're playing 20. They don't do a whole lot of stuff. We used to play. I don't want to smear the. You guys know what I'm talking about. Yeah. They don't play those things anymore. They don't do any of that. I don't know what they do. they scroll social media.
We were built different. We lived outside. We played everything. You learned how to kick field goals.
Everything now is so technical. I got a trainer for this. I got a trainer for that. We were our own trainers growing up.
Specialization.
Yeah.
It's the word now. I'm going to push some Brock Purdy conversation back till tomorrow. No doubt there's going to be a lot of opportunity to talk about quarterbacks. He threw a couple of interceptions on day one of camp. Kyle Shanahan was asked about Purdy, if he was handed the keys. I'm sure we'll get more reports about how Purdy is looking now with the new contract. And so I want to pass on that for a second, because I think day one of the biggest competition in training camp, which is linebacker, who's going to start at Will, who's going to start at Sam linebacker for the 49ers. And apparently it was a good day for Dee Winters. He is the veteran. And he had a pick six. He had one of those interceptions of Brock Purdy today. And by all accounts had a really nice practice. So, you can't win the job on day one of practice, but Dee Winters looking good on day one. So that's a good sign for the 49ers. And again, that's a definite sharpening iron situation where there's a highly drafted rookie pushing for a job, and it's going to probably make everybody better.
For a guy like Dee Winters, it's a huge confidence builder, right? Like, all right, I'm coming in. It's kind of my job to lose. I got these guys that I am competing with, and I go out there, I get a pick six, I make a big play like that, picking off a slant route, taking it to the crib off QB1. Oh, that's a huge boost. And not just for him, the coaches see it, his teammates see it. Those are the things that make you truly feel like you're moving in the right direction. Those are also the things that 49ers got out of Dre Greenlaw, where he was constantly making those kind of plays in training camp. He's making those plays in the game. D has to make those plays in the game, but before you can even make it in the game, you got to make it in practice. So that's a great job and a great start to training camp for him, a guy who we've talked about. He's definitely under fire. They didn't draft Nick Martin for no reason.
Absolutely. Training camp is on. Stay tuned here to Locked On 49ers. Every day we will have notes from camp. We will have notes from the press conferences and take you through every single day as we get ready for the 2025 season. Make sure you are subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you listen to your podcasts. And Croc and I back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.